Welcome. This is our monthly MedTech Forum that we do in partnership with Ximedica and NEMIC, New England Medical Innovation Center. Since 2014, our partner Ximedica has conducted this forum as an internal monthly information sharing platform to inform and inspire its employees about the newest medical related technologies in the public domain, with the intent to spur creative ideas and innovative thinking in their work. Through our partnership with Ximedica and NEMIC, we are excited to bring this monthly forum to spur innovative ideas in you.
I'm Danielle Sturm. I'm the Manager of Business Development, Marketing Communications at NEMIC. And for any of you that don't know, NEMIC is a MedTech venture studio located in Providence, and we support medical technology startups and digital health startups, usually mostly in the regulated space, from all over the world, develop their business in the US, prepare for fundraising, and eventually bring their products forward to successful commercialization and getting them on the market. We host, incubator programs, accelerator programs. We do have a program that we just announced a few months ago that we still have applications open for, and that is in partnership with a local fund called Magpie X, and that is for startups in the regulated space, working on medical technologies and digital health applications to apply for that. They can get pretty much support from NEMIC and our large network of advisors and our education program, and really support in building their business for successful fundraising. But on the backside of that, Magpie X will have a cash investment for your startup, which is really exciting, especially the organization being here in Rhode Island. It's one of the first medical technology focused funds in the state. So please check that out. And before we get into the forum, I have one more announcement. So we have an upcoming COVID-19 response innovation hackathon. And I believe the last time I talked about this, we didn't put on our hackathon yet. So we hosted two. We just finished one that happened in March, and that went amazingly well. We had 4 teams come out. All 4 of them, I believe, are still working on the kind of ideas and technologies that they created. And the focus of this is, creating new solutions. It could be services, it could be technologies, it could be products that will combat the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and best prepare ourselves for future pandemics. Because working in the healthcare space, we really believe it's not if, but when this is going to happen again, and we want to be better prepared. So the next one is April 16th through 18th, and it's focused on supporting at-risk individuals and at-risk groups that have been hit hardest this past year, specifically in Rhode Island, but also beyond. We've found that really building and piloting ideas here in Rhode Island really sets them up for great success once you leave the state and get farther into, the domestic United States and worldwide. What can you expect in participating? We have created an environment that pulls innovators, business advisors, designers, mentors, and judges from around the New England area that support participating teams by, helping you guys innovate, create, and then pitch your ideas for cash prizes at the end of the weekend. All participants will be assigned to teams and assigned a specific design lead who will take you through, thought-provoking exercises, down selection of the concepts, really nailing in on the idea you guys choose, and then pitching it at the end of the hackathon. It's totally virtual. It is only open to Rhode Island-based residents, students of Rhode Island universities, and if you are an employee of a Rhode Island organization, you can participate as well. Last hackathon, we had people from all over the United States join us, which was really, really fun. I will drop a link in the chat box shortly, but I hope that you guys can join us, innovate these solutions and really change our state for the better for when this happens again. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy Carter from Ximedica.
Thanks, Danielle. Hi, Cindy Carter here. I'm the marketing manager for Ximedica. A little bit about Ximedica. We're a full-service product development company with over 30 years experience in healthcare. Our human-centered integrated process to create medical products are thoughtfully designed, approved, manufactured, and ultimately delivered to market. Ximedica is where exceptional healthcare technologies are created.
So for those who have attended these monthly forums in the past, you will be familiar with what this is about. But those who are new, we always have a few joining us. We do this on a monthly basis, and it is a mix of looking at different categories in the medtech space that have come to have new innovations that have come into the public domain. We hold this forum on a regular basis to help inform our own creative development and concept development for clients. And it always fosters a dialogue in the weeks after each forum. And it's a way to kind of keep us visible in terms of the new innovation that's coming out. And seeing what's coming out from academia, from startups, as well as Fortune 500 companies. And this list of categories kind of has ebbed and flowed over the years. If there's a particular category that you're interested in that you don't see reflected here, please shout out. This is very much an adaptable to the audience forum. So I'm going to jump right into the first category, which is materials. This first one, for those who are working in the heart valve transplant space, this is pretty interesting. So particularly for children who have a heart defect at birth, the problem with these valves that are placed into them is that they don't grow as a child grows. And so the valve becomes loose because their vessels are themselves growing. And that means that they have to go back for another complicated removal of valve 1 to replace bigger valve 2. So the University of Minnesota, shout out to my Minnesota peeps, is that, where we have an office, by the way, what the University of Minnesota have done is they've explored the idea of creating a scaffold using sheepskin cells combined with gelatinous protein called fibrin, and they build essentially plant those two things into a tube-shaped bioreactor, and then add in a cell growth factor protein, and that causes the mixture to grow into a tube shape. After a period of time, detergent is flushed through, so all those actual sheep cells, try and say that 5 times fast, are flushed out, leaving just a collagen matrix in a tubular form, which is the perfect form for a valve. And they start to then join those 3 tubes together then to create a valve-like structure. And then they slice it into rings, kind of like a jelly donut, if you will, or a series of jelly donuts on a jelly roll. And then those form of, as you can see on the visual here, these heart valve leaflets. So it's a really innovative process. It's a little time consuming, of course. And then what they've done is they've taken these developed valves, placed them into arteries of lambs, who obviously grow themselves. And they found that over time, the lamb's actual animal cells migrate into the collagen matrix and take it over with their own biological material. So the valve becomes kind of part of their own bodies. And so this is a really very encouraging, particularly for children with heart defects in the future. All right, staying in the same vein of cell building, the University of Buffalo is exploring the idea of fast hydrogel stereolithography printing to actually print more viable cells in a hydrogel biocompatible matrix. And literally, they're thinking about how to replicate donor organs. We all know that donor organs are in very short supply, particularly for those who need them for transplants. And so they're looking at how to print entire organs with the embedded blood vessels built into them. So they've obviously shown here a hand kind of really creepily emerging out of liquid, but they're really exploring this for things like kidneys and hearts in particular. So as that 3D printed organ can be placed in the body, it can be fully viable with the built-in blood vasculature that's needed. When I saw this image, it kind of made me remind me of some very odd fish. And in fact, it is trying to become a fish. This is a soft electrical hydrogel. Why electrical? Well, so that we can start to conduct electricity through 3D printing. So this is actually a combination of materials of both silver and hydrogel that are able to both be compliant, soft and stretchy, and also also work with very delicate human tissue that we have. And it has the ability to carry sensor-based signals for placement in the brain, or even have the ability to be a stretchable display that's worn on the skin. So the material is actually created by suspending silver flakes in a polyacrylamide alginate hydrogel, and then partially dehydrating that gel. And as that drying process happens, the flakes form into this kind of interpenetrating network, even though then the gel is not actually disrupted. And so when the gel is flexed or moved, that network of silver essentially stays in place. And you can remarkably turn off that electrical connection by hydrating and dehydrating the gel back and forth. So that kind of presents some really interesting future applications for body implants in particular. Staying in the vein of metal, Ultrafuse 316L by BASF, one of our mechanical engineers, Nathan Ronan's found this one for us. This is a metal filament that enables 3D printing of a stainless steel metal part. So when we think about 3D printing and what it looks like in terms of the material, it's kind of plasticky, it's not really quite fully formed, there's some bumps and ridges on it. Well, now this is a bit of a game changer. It's actually available in the marketplace today. So we can actually start to 3D print metal products, thinking tooling, jigs, even prototypes in terms of metal, and even jewelry commercially available today. So it's really could change what we think of when we think of 3D printing moving forward. Also staying in the electrical space, the conductive cellulose thread that's made through a combination of wood that is dyed with an ink on an electrically conductive biocompatible polymer that we call PEDOT-PSS, so big, a long acronym. And this thread then can also be very conveniently sewn into a fabric with a standard sewing machine to produce a thermoelectric textile that can generate electricity when it's subjected to heat on one side, for example, body heat. And the threads, unfortunately, do lose their conductivity after about 5 washes, but you could see some very valuable applications, for example, wound dressings that can help heal a wound faster based on applying a form of electrical current to it. This is a sensor, but also a material and a diagnostic. Thinking, we've explored various different tattoos and biopatches, and before my alma mater, University College London, has developed a biodegradable tattoo that can be used to monitor different physical performance metrics. It has a electroluminescent polymer that's very, very thin, just 76 nanometers, and it emits light when it's subjected to an electric field. So if you place a pair of electrodes within this layer, insulating layer, and that layer can then be applied to tattoo paper, like a temporary tattoo that a child might get. It's placed on the skin just with standard water and a little bit of pressure. And this device can be made cheaply, it's highly scalable to create something like a glowing tattoo, or if you're wanting to get into the fashion area, maybe a light emitting fingernail that can detect for sweat, it can detect for dehydration, it can detect for sun exposure, or even a past expiration date on some produce, meat, or fruit or vegetables. So it really could have some very useful applications. We've seen similar technologies like this, but pushing the realm in terms of electricity based in a tattoo in a safe way. Also staying in the context of materials and biomarkers, this smart shirt generates electricity from the wearer through both sweat and movement. And it has a combination of a biocell fuel, which is built into the chest area, a triboelectric generator, and supercapacitors to actually store the energy all in the same shirt. The parts are screen printed onto the fabric. And there's a waterproof silver circuitry as well. So this fabric obviously is flexible, it's foldable, it's even washable. And the biofuel cells contain an enzyme that swaps electrons between lactate and oxygen molecules that are found in human sweat. And the triboelectric generators are based on a charge that lives between the arm and the chest area on the side. And so as you're walking, right, your arm will rub against your side of your torso, and that in itself generates a form of electricity that then can be put onto essentially the supercapacitor of the battery that's built in. And they found that through wear, 30 minutes of just basic exercise, cardio, like fast walking, can power a small display, an LCD, for example, on a wristwatch, or some form of fitness tracker. So maybe in the future we may not need to charge our smartphones or wristwatches because we're wearing fabrics that allow us to do this naturally. Right, transitioning into robotics, but also still materials. This is a soft robotic grasper coming out of an academic team in China. It's inspired by the Venus flytrap, which, if you're familiar with, responds and opens based on sensing objects, particularly flies, around it. This particular grasper is made from a liquid crystal elastomer polymer, which changes in response to temperature. The liquid metal alloy is applied to a surface to form an uninterrupted circuit, and it's all sealed in a layer of silicon. So when an electric current runs through and generates a current, a small amount of heat is produced, and that when you apply pressure to the grasping surface, it stretches out the circuit and causes and that causes the current and the material temperature to drop. And so you're seeing a curling inwards to grasp, and then a curling or kind of straightening back out to be able to kind of grasp, lift, and move objects in a more robotic fashion. Quite a lot of work to be done there. But also in the context of more sophisticated robotics, the Simon Fraser University, which is a Canadian academic institution, is exploring the idea of a robot that can monitor our vitals. So essentially clinicians can be deployed elsewhere for more important clinical tasks. Specifically, there are 3 robots as part of this project that can sense and measure various different healthcare parameters. It can conduct electrocardiogram, collect oxygen levels, respiration rates, and temperature. So one robot, as you can see on this visual here, has a robotic arm that contains electrodes at the fingertips and can take measurements when coming in contact with the patient's arm. There's an insole that goes into a shoe, obviously, that monitors a patient's gait. And a third robot is able to track oxygen levels. And the idea of all these 3 different robots is hopefully in the future, they can combine them into one unified mega autonomous healthcare robotic assistant. So that where we want to try and minimize contact between patients and clinicians in another COVID future, hopefully not pandemic, those clinicians can be saved for other more essential interactions. The Hominus surgical platform by NEMIC is a system designed specifically for transvaginal benign surgical procedures, such as a hysterectomy. So the workstation has an intuitive operation of surgical tools with 360-degree articulation at the distal end, as you can see on this image here, that's able to articulate and have multi-planar flexibility, which is important for a hysterectomy. The human level dexterity at that distal tip is maintained by the instrument, and the instrument is able to mimic the human arm with both shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints that allow for more targeted access that a linear instrument, I think most laparoscopic tools cannot be able to achieve. So the end result of this work is that it's a more cost-effective and less invasive option over other robotic instruments like Da Vinci, that in terms of providing conducting a hysterectomy, actually have to go in through an incision through the abdomen, as opposed to transvaginal. There is no incision here. So they've gotten de novo authorization from the FDA, so planning to roll out commercialization in the US. This effort is very much validating for me because we worked on a project very similar to this a while ago, digital surgery by Medtronic Surgical Robotics. This article is actually an interview with one of the leadership on this team at Medtronic, and it's a very insightful one in terms of speaking to where the whole industry is going in terms of digital surgery. In actual fact, we hear so much about Da Vinci and other robotic surgical tools, but in fact, only 3% of surgeries globally are conducted with the help of a robot in some form, which is a pretty small number given how much hype it's been getting. Medtronic is looking to speed up that number with the introduction of a product that's been kind of in the rumor mill for quite a while, Hugo, that will be indicated for soft tissue, so through the belly primarily, maybe lung. And what they've developed this robotic system to achieve a high utilization rate based on their statistics. They have been able to come to the conclusion that in robotic suites or operating rooms, really there's only on average one robotic case per day because that's all the hospital can accommodate for. The challenges with the fast turnover of the case, of one case to the next one is just too burdensome with the existing robotic systems. So they're looking at designing Hugo to be much more modular and to have the flexibility to be able to work in a robotic form, but also to support a lap surgical case. The company Medtronic also recently bought a startup called Digital Surgery that enables Hugo to analyze procedural steps done by the surgeon and provide guidance on how that surgeon can improve their efficiency and reduce their variability by comparing their work on that case to other surgeons who've done exactly the same procedure. They're calling this Touch Surgery Enterprise. It's pretty significant, just the fact that they're bringing this to market, the idea that, yes, surgeons do share their best cases, but do they share their worst cases? And do they share are they willing to allow for more efficiency and to hear feedback on how they might be able to do their work better? It's quite a reach out by Medtronic, but it's a well-needed one. The platform also provides a real-time intelligence to anticipate and mitigate for use errors. So if you're getting close to a very large nerve bundle, the energy of the instruments actually deactivates, and you get that kind of level of responsiveness to say that you're in this danger zone. You maybe shouldn't proceed further. Really very interesting in terms of what this means as a much more competitive player against Da Vinci in the near future. This is not really in the medical space, but interesting nonetheless. I mean, it's still saving lives. This is a robotic lifesaver, if you will, called Sightbic, coming out of Germany, the Fraunhofer Institute. It's a water rescue service. It has been built for the town of Halle, I don't know quite how to pronounce that. And this is a robot that resides underwater. It docks to an underwater docking station. It's very kind of James Bond at a certain level, under a pool or lake. And cameras at or above the water level, if you're in a swimming pool, obviously that would be maybe more easier to monitor from a ceiling of a swimming pool. But the idea is that cameras above the water surface monitor movement and patterns of all the folks who are swimming in that area. And when an artificial intelligence system detects that someone is showing signs of drowning, flapping wildly or really sinking in the water, the location of that swimmer is sent to the robot, who then moves the location, moves underneath the swimmer, and then pulls them up to the surface on a flat stretcher, as you can see on the images. There's a clasping mechanism that can hold an unresponsive body to the stretcher to keep it from slipping off. And then an alert obviously is sent to the lifeguards if they are asleep at the wheel to get them to that individual to bring them to the poolside or to the water's edge. Right, transitioning to user interactions. This first product obviously is shown in terms of your work desk or maybe an instrument capability, but you can certainly imagine this role in the context of a surgical space or other clinical tasks. Called Tap ID, coming out of ETH in Switzerland. When a finger is tapped against a hard surface, it produces a vibration that's unique to each finger. And That's a fact, right? Even though you're not necessarily aware of it, this tap ID system is able to recognize the unique aspects of that vibration through this rubber wristband that has two accelerometers that detect the vibrations in real time as they travel up to the wristbands. Software on a computer analyzes that wristband data in real time to determine which finger has been tapped, based on that vibrational profile, and then a virtual interface such as a piano or a computer keyboard that can be projected on a surface in real time to mimic those finger taps to support a number of different activities. And I'm going to show you the next innovation is actually very similar to this, but works in a very similar way, but has a different form factor. This is coming out of Facebook Reality Labs, which is doing a lot of innovation, particularly for gaming and for social media, for obvious reasons. So what this particular article shared is our physical interactions with digital devices they're pretty ancient at this point. We're relying on GUIs, graphical user interfaces, we're relying on computer mouses, and we're relying on the good old touch screen to help communicate what we as humans want with the technology that we're interacting with. But those things don't really work in augmented reality. So in order for successful human-machine interfaces to be viable and to have a fast response in augmented reality, the mechanism to understand the controls has to operate at the speed of thought, as smooth and as effortlessly as possible. Otherwise, it's just augmented reality is always going to feel very different from the actual reality. Now, interesting fact, the brain has more neurons dedicated to controlling the wrist and the hand than any other part of the body. You would think that that would not be the case, but the wrist is a really important area of focus. That's why Facebook is there, that's why Apple is there on your phones, and that's why the previous device was also a wristband. So this wrist-mounted controller reads neural impulses as they travel down the wearer's arm, and even before the wearer is actually lifting up the finger, the intention to lift up the finger is being detected and then translated into a command for the mechanism that you're in. So the prototype that Facebook has developed is used as a 6-dimensional game controller kind of joystick, if you will, that has a latency of 50 milliseconds, so really quite short. And they're really aspiring to get that down to 0 as much as they can, obviously for gaming purposes in particular. But again, thinking about its role in clinical applications and surgery, where you may really benefit from having the context of other imaging or other data to support your case. Would be very helpful. Okay, staying also in user interactions, the Cognition One is an augmented reality headset that has a brain computer interface that turns thoughts into commands. So let the wrist go at this point, just go straight to the brain. This is designed specifically for patients with cerebral palsy and myotropic lateral sclerosis. Those folks in particular have communication disorders. And so this product has been developed by a team of neurologists, biosignal engineers, and speech language pathologists. The product involves 6 non-invasive electrodes that are part of the headset design and adapts to the brain any head shape that a patient might have. The unit is self-contained and has connectivity to LTE or 5G networks, and it allows for application of a variety of video games, of course, and interactive media, but it can also, you can imagine how it might have clinical surgical applications. The idea is that the headset can be controlled by head movements, voice commands, and switch control, as well as reading the brain. So they are inviting people to join their beta testing program if you're interested, to have a go with this and give them feedback. Let me know if you become a volunteer. I'll be interested to hear more. Also in user interactions, this was a bumper month for that particular category. The C2FIV, I'm sure there's a way to pronounce that in a way that makes it sound like a real word, from Brigham Young University. This particular professor decided that the facial recognition that we're starting to have with our phones is not really quite acceptable, because you can open up a smartphone just by holding it against a person's face while they're sleeping, or even just show a photograph of their face, and that can open up the phone. So this C2FIV stands for concurrent two-factor identity or identify verification, that is attempting to kind of get around that trick that maybe some wrongdoers might be pursuing. And so what's involved for the user is when you are starting up your smartphone with this software, you have to record a 1 to 2 second close-up video of you making a certain facial movement. For example, you might smile, or you might blink, or you might raise or scowl your eyebrows. And that is captured as a video by the phone. And so when you come to open up the phone again, it's going to compare that same facial expression and match it against the original recording. And the software that's been developed has a 90% accuracy rate. And this professor from Brigham Young believes it could be incorporated into ATMs, other kind of areas where security is important, safety deposit boxes, or maybe even opening up a car. Imagine people scowling at their car and to open it up. But you can see kind of the evolution of designing your facial recognition as a way to be more secure. It's like, well, someone's going to find a workaround somewhere. All right, transitioning into diagnostic devices. For those who have young babies, and there's been quite an explosion of them at Ximedica in the last 9 months or so. This is a jaundice sensor for newborns coming out of Japan. Jaundice apparently occurs quite widely in 60 to 80% of all newborn babies at some level or another. And it's always something of an importance to monitor. And if it's left unchecked, it can result in brain damage. So obviously parents and clinicians have high concern about this. What causes jaundice is an increase in bilirubin in the bloodstream. And the current treatment involves exposing the infant to blue light, which you can see on the image on the left-hand side, which breaks down that bilirubin, and then as it's passed into urine, excuse me. This process can take some time and can lead to dehydration, and ultimately can lead to development of allergies that affect quality of life. So this prototype is battery powered and it's placed on the baby's forehead and uses an integrated camera and LED to photograph the skin. So less exposure to the baby of blue light that causes all of these other complications. The data collected by the device is paired to a smartphone, of course, where it analyzes the bilirubin levels in real time and provides a clinical team with other approaches and early approach to tackling the issue. This product is pretty interesting. The next couple that actually follow in the kind of same vein. This is a artificial intelligence contactless ability to monitor the heart, coming from the University of Washington. It looks like a speaker. And in fact, it works like a speaker, and it's sending out sound waves. And in sending out sound waves, it's able to receive back the reflected or the mirrored sound waves from the person standing or the patient standing close by. And to be able to read those sound waves and detect for irregular heartbeat is pretty incredible. And so it's doing this obviously without the need for physical touch, and it has the ability to track both regular and irregular heart rhythms for the detection of arrhythmia, for example, or other cardiac conditions. It's self-supervised in terms of its ability to learn on the fly and monitor different signals from different areas around the room. It uses multiple microphones that send out an inaudible signal, TBD on whether your dog can hear it or not, but then it then analyzes those sounds that bounce back to the speaker from a person sitting up to 1 to 2 feet away. And those tiny alterations in those return sounds caused by a heartbeat, and the time between 2 heartbeats can be detected and therefore be able to detect for arrhythmia. This product, it works in a similar way, but its application is for monitoring for correct medical adherence. So it's a wall unit that looks basically like a blank canvas tied to an electrical cord that plugs into the wall, that is used particularly for monitoring inhaler use or an insulin pen without infringing on patients' privacy, because it's not actually recording, there's no video, there's no visual element of this. And it was actually a system adapted for monitoring sleep. So the device emits low power radio waves that can expand up to 33 feet in radius from the device. And when a patient's in that area, the body is, like in the previous innovation, reflecting back those waves. So every movement that's made, as even though I'm waving my hand or maybe pressing on a inhaler, that movement is modulated back in a specific way that can be analyzed by the software. So if the modulations don't actually match the properly trained movement, then that system can notify the user and help maybe retrain them. For example, if I'm meant to hold down an insulin pen for 10 seconds instead of 5, the system can recognize that. Or if I'm meant to be breathing out when before I press down on my inhaler, it can also recognize that and tell me how I might be able to improve getting the correct medication into my body. And the accuracy level is about 96% for insulin pens and 99% for inhaler uses. So pretty remarkable as a passive methodology. Right. Switching gears a little bit in terms of diagnostics and what a diagnostic can be. This is a pregnancy test that's basically biodegradable and flushable. Remarkably, we have 20 million at-home plastic pregnancy tests sold every year in the US, and presumably they all end up in the landfill. This product weighs about the equivalent of 4 squares of toilet paper and is made from a non-woven cellulose equivalent to toilet paper. And that means it can be flushed or even composted, since the natural plant fibers essentially biodegrade within 10 weeks. The test has a 90% accuracy rate and comes with appropriately a nondescript private wrapper. And I love their tagline: over 99% accurate, 0% plastic, and 100% your business, meaning nobody else's business. They've got an FDA approval and are commercially available today for $13.99 for a 2-pack. All right, this next diagnostic is a skin test for Parkinson's. So the skin is a great biomarker for a whole bunch of things. The next innovation will speak about this as well. But Parkinson's disease has some biomarkers that can be found on the skin, as well as in the gut and in tears. So this new swab-based diagnostic is gathering chemical information from essentially skin sebum, which is the oily part of the skin often found on the neck, on the back, and on the face for those who have acne. And this oily layer is really very precious. It's got a lot of information in it. So don't minimize your oily skin, because it's telling you an awful lot of information if you only choose to tap into it. So particularly for Parkinson's, those patients actually seem to be producing more sebum molecules than other people. And in a study that was done by University of Manchester in the UK of 500 people, mass spectrometry was able to monitor chemical molecule signatures of the sebum over time. And there are actually 10 chemicals in the sebum that change and progress with the advancement of the disease. So this could mean for much earlier detection and therefore earlier treatment for those patients suffering with Parkinson's. This hemoglobin diagnostic microchip coming out of India is attempting to provide a quicker, faster, cheaper way to evaluate hemoglobin. Of course, hemoglobin is a key health biomarker for a number of conditions, including anemia and pulmonary fibrosis, something that is obviously important for COVID. So the current equipment that's out there, it's bulky, it's expensive, it requires large volume samples, versus this system, which is a benchtop and combines a microfluid chip that costs way less than a cent, and which is loaded with a blood sample, that microfluidic chip. The sample runs a sodium lauryl sulfate assay to detect for hemoglobin, and a microscope built into the system estimates the amount of hemoglobin on the sample using a green LED light, which is absorbed by that chemical complex of the sodium lauryl sulfate with hemoglobin. So pretty simple technology. So this innovation is a contact lens that is diagnosing for conditions like glaucoma and diabetic retinopathy. So the current process today involves placing a device against the eye and projecting light onto it, and it's measuring the electrical signals generated by the retina. It's pretty uncomfortable, it's unpleasant as an experience, and it often requires the patient to go under either local or general anesthesia. So this new contact lens can do the work that a conventional test does in a much more comfortable manner, and it uses superior electroretinography signal recordings and can be realized with the fact that we now have much more flexible electronics, and we can now print sensor components with a wet adhesive bonding onto a contact lens. So expect this test to come from your optometrist at some point in the future. Another contact lens is able to correct for color blindness. This comes out of the UAE. So these lenses are increasing the green-red contrast using gold nanoparticles. And this creates a kind of cranberry glass that has a pink hue. The gold material is mixed with a hydrogel and filters light in that wavelength where green and red coincides, and that's able to increase the contrast for those folks who have color blindness. So they've developed the technology, and their next step is to begin human trials to evaluate the comfort and efficacy of their product or their innovation. So this product in the IntelliFlow bladder management system is intended to support those folks who have problems with urinary retention. Not a fun condition, I'm sure. So this is a wireless smart urinary catheter that can be controlled with a remote control button. The patients today have to, who have this condition, it's pretty damning to quality of life, in that they have to go through, on an average month, 200 disposable catheters that need to be switched out on a daily basis, and also deal with an external drainage bag. And all of that is very inconvenient, it's expensive, and it can also lead to quite a lot of infection complications for obvious reasons. This particular device was developed by an ex-Marine who was paralyzed in combat, so definitely gets a bleeding heart from that perspective. The IntelliFlow resides in place for a week, and a magnetic valve pump can be opened and closed with the switch in the external device that is control for urination. Oh, got a dog bark. And then the pump actually built into the catheter dispels the urine to enable more complete emptying. And they've gotten into their clinical trials with an F10K submission planned for middle of this year. This next product is in the disability space, to a certain degree, is similar to the previous, in terms of this is a spinal cord injury scaffold therapy coming out of UCLA. So axons are nerve fibers that carry electrical signals around the body, but they don't really regenerate after a spinal cord injury because the immune cells flood that site and form scar tissue, which those axons aren't able to get around and reconnect with each other. And so this essentially porous scaffold material built out of hyaluronic acid and is loaded with gene therapy vectors, which are what are encoded for brain-derived neuropathic factor BDNF, which is what the image on the right-hand side is representing. It creates an environment, that scaffold creates an environment for the axons to reconnect and repair. So when they compared in a mouse study, those mice that had a spinal or been caused to have a spinal cord injury, after 8 weeks, the injured site had significant axon markers compared to the control group. As you compare left and right, what you're looking for is the red on the right-hand side and the lack of it on the left. And they believe the results have the potential to improve both brain and spinal cord repair, but also potentially could be used for brain-machine interfaces, prosthetics, as well as treat for neurodegenerative diseases, as they believe that these axons can have a significant impact across all of those disease states. Two products in the COVID space. This COVID phone test, we're getting smarter and smarter about how to test for COVID-19. Coming out of Rice University, this is a stamp size, kind of a big stamp, but nonetheless, stamp-sized microfluidic chip that measures a concentration of COVID protein in blood serum, just from a finger prick. The nanobeads bind to the COVID protein in the chip and then transport that to a sensor biomarker in the device. And that can then be plugged in to a computer that provides the results in under an hour. And that's a significant improvement over the standard PCR lab tests that we may have had experience using today. For those who've had one of these brain scratching swab tests, you will be frustrated to know that the skin will do your job, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Parkinson's. Well, the skin is a marvelous thing. It's our most important body organ, some people would say. The skin also changes in response to COVID for those patients. And it's particularly the lipid levels found in, remember the sebum I was talking about earlier, those very sebum-rich areas on the skin and face. So using liquid chromography, mass spectrometry, patients with COVID positive samples actually end up having lower lipid levels, also referred to as dyslipidemia, than COVID negative patients. And so this study that was done, I believe, with 60 patients in the UK confirms that COVID does actually damage more parts of the metabolism than we had otherwise thought, including damaging skin lipidomes. So, you know, potentially in the future, if we're having to deal with COVID a year from now, it might just be a simple skin swab done on our oily areas of our faces, necks, and backs. All right, one of the last couple of categories that we have here in the remaining minutes here, the other category is always one of my favorites, where we learn about maybe not necessarily related to med device, but certainly expands our kind of understanding of what technology is and can do. This is a modular electric vehicle battery swapping system coming out of a company called Ample, and they're testing it already in the Bay Area. So any folks from San Francisco, let me know if you see this. The problem with electric vehicles is that it can take quite a lot of time to recharge from empty a battery. And so what this platform is doing a quick swap out. And it's as simple as that. You drive in onto the station's platform, and an automated process removes the spent battery and replaces them with fully charged ones in just under 10 minutes. So that's 3 times faster than current charging batteries today for those people who are very impatient. And the removed modules are recharged and then set aside for the next vehicle to roll in. The swapping station's been designed in a modular way so it can be shipped and assembled right on site. It takes up about 2 parking spaces at a grocery store or even a highway rest stop. Seeing what happens to this pilot and seeing what happens in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, this is coming. This next robotic is for those in urban environments who are kind of wary about getting into mass commuter transport again. The roller by New Deal Design is a concept. It's not a real thing yet. It's the idea of an open-air trolley that functions kind of like an electric scooter. It rides low to the ground, and it can provide a very, it could ride on popular commuter routes, cruising at 8 to 12 miles per hour. Just imagine surfing down like Michigan Avenue, where I live in Chicago. It can hold up to 3 passengers. It can also accommodate a wheelchair and is easy to step on board and hop off. So you could hail it with an app, just like you might hail an Uber today, but it's much more versatile in terms of the fluidity of the experience. And of course, it's electric, so it can not add to our global warming issues. This next product is enabling for faster detection of earthquakes by using existing submarine cables. So today, if you're not familiar with this, there's a network across our oceans of submarine communication cables, and that's how we're able to call, I'm able to call my relatives in the UK, is how we're able to communicate with people on the other side of the world. But these communications can actually serve us with another purpose by providing both earthquake and tsunami detection and early warning systems much faster than land seismometers and the ocean seismic networks that are in place in various parts of around the world. So the Caltech and Google have partnered to use these fiber optic cables that have already polarized laser pulses and use and basically collect that data that's coming in and routinely monitor it. When that cable is disturbed by a shift in the waters as a result of an earthquake, that polarization of those cables changes. And if you are able to be constantly monitoring it, in the way that they did with what's called the Curie cable, which is apparently one that's run under the west coast of the American continent, along the side of the American continent from North America down to Latin America. The pulse polarization was analyzed up to 20 times per second to detect 20 moderate to large earthquakes in the course of the period of the test. So this might have a significant improvement in difference for those who are affected by tsunamis. I think folks in China and Japan as an example. So going from the very little untapped world of the oceans to up into space, in 2026, you'll be able to travel to the moon according to the Orbital Assembly Corporation and stay for 3.5 days if you're willing to drop $5 million to do so. This is the first luxury space hotel. The design of it is going to be circular and approximately 700 feet diameter, and it will be assembled in orbit by semi-autonomous and remote controlled robots. This is real. They've got an investment. It's coming. It's really remarkable. The whole system is going to slowly rotate, and you'll be able to do a spacewalk. You'll be able to have fine dining and maybe even listen to Beyonce perform live or Sting perform live on this space station. Is going to have 100 crew, kind of like, the cruise lines will be on board, and will be able to cater to up to 300 visitors in individual bedroom pods, which I assume is what this is, representing this image here. And each visitor is not going to need any astronaut training. You just turn up, get into your suit, and off you go, maybe using one of the SpaceX robots to get there, assuming that those have been proven out, of course. So they are planning in the next few months actually to start a small scale 130-foot gravity ring to prove the construction feasibility of building this thing in space. And just out of interest for all of us, the International Space Station is actually 22 years old and cost $150 billion to build and accommodates 7 people, 7 professionals no less. So this is pretty dramatic. I'm excited. Hoping to be around for 2026 to see what happens. Okay, the next other is, in the context of imaging, is a facial recognition drone, which in itself is not remarkable, but AnyVision has filed for a patent for a drone to be able to adapt its position to improve its ability to gain facial recognition of a particular subject or group of people. It has a computer vision system that analyzes the angle of the drone camera in relation to the face of the person who's in question or being looked at, and then instruct the drone to move to improve its vantage point. The drone then takes an image that's then analyzed by an AI algorithm to classify an individual face and determine classification with a probability score. Of course, the privacy activists and people concerned about individual security are all up in arms of this for obvious reasons. But the technology has already been used by the police, the military, retailers, and hospitals in some circumstances. So quite a lot of questions there. Okay, 2 products in the hard category, which is one which is, gosh, not quite sure how that's going to work. Has anyone been thinking about the usability of this? Is this even a business proposition? So this product is a transparent access keypad developed in partnership between 3 Swiss institutions. It's a prototype made of, and of course the Swiss would come out with a super secure keypad. This is a prototype made of thin, clear polymer film substrate that has inkjet printed numerical buttons and circuits made of transparent ink, so you can't see them. So you kind of have to know what you're doing and get the training before you do it. The ink itself contains indium tin oxide nanoparticles and is conductive. The process of producing this keypad involves dyeing the film blue, and then as light is sintered, and a high energy light is then used to sinter buttons and circuits onto the film. You still can't see them even though after that, because the blue coloration helps the substrate absorb light. So the finished product can be applied to anywhere near a door or a safe, as long as there's power supply nearby that the keypad can tap into. And only authorized users would actually know where the keypad is located and which buttons to press and where those buttons are on the keypad. I can see a whole bunch of problems with this. And the problem is, of course, is that there isn't a display to know that you've entered the product numbers wrong. So there has to be an electronic display nearby that shows the users which numbers have been entered. Of course, to me, that's a flaw. If you're going to have a transparent keypad, the whole thing should just be going to your brain. But we'll see. Okay, this last one is in really quite mind-blowing for those on the Ximedica side who are working in kind of this space on another project that we're wrapping up currently. The artificial uterus, flagged first by one of our systems engineers, Leonist, coming out of Israel, is exploring the idea of an artificial uterus, and they have made it functional for mice or mouse eggs. Transitioning a fertilized egg from a mouse at 5 days gestation and growing them in this uterus successfully for 11 days. And in this period of time, the embryo has developed limbs, a circulatory and nervous system with a heart beating 170 beats per minute. And they're doing these experiments not to start to think about how you might clone a human being, but to actually understand how mammals are developing and how gene mutations and nutrients and environmental conditions can affect a fetus. To help inform better care for the human race, of course. The leading physician, Dr. Hannah, has spent 7 years developing this 2-part uterus system. As you can see on the photograph on the left-hand side, includes incubators and nutrient and a ventilation system. The mice embryos are placed in these glass vials and where they float in a special nutrient fluid, and the whole system, all of those vials are attached to a wheel that spins slowly to avoid wall contact or wall attachment, which obviously can create some deformities in the mouth that has all kinds of impact for development. So that's it as our forum this month. We archive these forums and maintain a database for mining for concept generation and innovation ideas. If you want to tap into that, please reach out to us. More than happy to engage on a relevant project. Our next forum is every second Thursday of each month, so that means that we're looking at the 13th of May. And if you need to follow up with any of us, this is where you can find us.